Good afternoon. This is our final week of our Lenten words as we enter into this holiest of weeks in the church. And so as we prepare our hearts and minds for what lays ahead, we look at a particular set of words that will help us in our reflection and in our contemplation and in our worship. So today's word is gaze. And so the first thing that came to mind for me was when I was in school. I was an average student. Okay, but I was also not the one who would be raising their hands. I was not readily, gonna offer anything to anyone. So if the teacher asked for, for volunteers, or teacher asked for questions, immediately my eyes would go down. Like, don't make contact, don't look, because I don't want to be called upon. Also, I find that that's still true among adults too. When I'm in meetings and I ask for someone to pray and everybody's feet all of a sudden are checking out their feet to make sure. I don't know what about their feet. But we don't want to be called upon because we don't want to fix our gaze on another, because there's something about looking at others in the eye. So this is really kind of strange because right now I'm looking in the eye of myself as I'm doing this video. But when you look in the eyes of someone, there's a connection there more than just looking at somebody. I mean, how often have I found myself looking but not really looking at someone or looking at something? Somebody's like, well, what are you staring at? And I'm like, well, I'm not staring at anything. It's just my eyes are blurred looking in a general area, but my mind is fixed elsewhere. But when we really fix our eyes on someone else, it's different. We're paying attention to them. There's a section, a story in Acts where Peter and, I'm not sure if it's Barnabas, but one of the other disciples are getting ready to go into the temple. And there's a man there at the gate to the temple looking for help. And Peter stops and sets his gaze upon him, looks him in the eye, and pays attention to him, focuses their attention. How do we focus our attention on God? Now, we can't look God in the face like we can one another. But how do we fix our eyes, our gaze on God? Well, certainly it's in a cross, because in that we see something beyond ourselves. We fix our gaze on what that cross reminds us of Jesus' love and Jesus' grace, of Jesus' giving of his very life for our sakes. But also when we stop and fix our gaze on one another, when we really see one another, we see God. We see a reflection of God's image in each other. Too often my gaze is just kind of blurry, and not even with my glasses. That my eyes are not fixed on any one particular thing except maybe my computer screen, and then my eyes get pretty weary. But how do we fix our eyes on one another? To really gaze at one another. And how are we reminded also that God's gaze is fixed on us? Not necessarily in judgment or retribution, not waiting for us to fail in some ways, but that God's eyes are fixed on us in love and in compassion. So as we enter into this Holy Week, may we know that God's eyes are fixed on us, that God's gaze rests upon us. And may our gaze rest upon God, on Christ, and on the cross. I hope you're having a blessed week. I've put a couple Bible verses also on our blog that I will link here when I'm done, so that you may also look at those and use those as a part of your reflection for this Holy Week. So I pray that you're having a good week, and as we enter into this time, let us let our eyes rest upon the cross of Christ. Take care.